reassemble is to remove the retaining ring. So if I back this nut up like this, I bottom out essentially. It's hitting the seal here and this spiral retaining ring. So the way to remove that is to find the end of it, which is right.
If you need your tools, just holler. I got picks over here if you need them.
Okay.
There's a pick here too, a couple of them.
You gotta fish that edge out, and there's a little notch in there to get the screwdriver in underneath, and then you just chase it around. And now that's loose, and that was the only thing holding that seal in. So if I back it off, the seal will kind of push out.
When it was put together, was that seal one piece?
No, we split it like that to get it on there.
Okay.
So now I can remove this nut completely.
That's a brush seal.
And set aside these pieces. And then this one is the same thing, but the opposite end of it. So we'll spin this down to get access to it. This is also a spiral ring.
So it's a bigger thread on that end.
Yep. It'll drive the O-ring out that's sealing that end. So this is the part where I actually have to go to a vise to get it out. So we were talking about.
So the pitch diameter is bigger, but is the pitch the same on the two threads? It would
It's
have
gotta
to
be, right? It's gotta be. I don't know what that number is, but it's gotta be. So then you need a split ring pliers here to pop this pin out. This is what holds the clutch in place. I want to stay on there. So now you can see we were talking about this is the working position and this is the over travel position. The ramped position is the over travel and the half moon is the working position. So in a second I'll pull it apart and you'll be able to see the pin should be sitting in this one, and when you feel that little hitch as it disengages this clutch, it's actually the pin rolling in here. So what happens is as you're winding it initially, you're working on both these sets of threads, but then once there's enough resistance, this one actually remains stationary and this screw is moving inside of there as that pin rolls into this travel position, and it's only operating off of that set. So I can't actually pull this straight off because there's a cut that only goes so deep, and so the pin is hitting. So I actually have to go to the vise, or a vise of some sort to clamp that.
We don't have any vices here, do we?
We got a broken one over here if you want to use it.
So yeah, you're gonna want to wrap it.
This is where you use like a Wilton vise.
Yeah, you could use just a crappy vise. Yeah.
I meant to put this on a rubber pad so it doesn't
Skate around.
Yeah. I've got one over someplace.
So I'm not going to put a ton of clamping force on it, just enough to kind of grip it. And then what I need to do here is just roll this out of that position. I didn't tighten it quite enough. Still not quite enough.
Let me get a pad underneath here.
There's some vices that we can use that are fully seated to the table too.
I must have been doing it on the 4-inch earlier because it was popping out of there easier.
Here's
Oh, I guess that's the other trick is if you pop it, like it pops there. If I just do this, it's not going. If I do that, you can feel it. If you guys want to do this, you can feel what it feels like to get that pin from this position into there, and now it's freely moving.
So is it like a spring-loaded plunger that's in
Yeah,
there?
in a second when I
Let's
pull
see
it
the
out, you'll
guts,
see it.
yeah.
So right here, it's in that position. Now I'm where I can remove it. So I'll pull this apart, and we'll go back to that table, and I'll take it the rest of the way apart.
Sweet.
That's the fun part.
So I'm just gonna pull this off a little bit at a time. You'll see where it starts. How far down is it? It's further down than I realized. There it is. So that's the pin that we were dealing with. Now I'm gonna
Should I put my safety glasses on?
I'm gonna cover it
He's
before I.
fine.
So it's these 3 springs pushing on that pin, and that's what's
Oh, gotcha.
riding in this working groove here,
Okay.
and it pops out in here, and then this is the over travel position. So then those 3 springs just dump out. This holding block comes off the screw. And then to take the holding block apart, you guys already saw this. We remove this set screw. And unwind that preload.
Just as a side note, we do sell those special spanner wrenches, but it's an accessory.
Yep.
And it really should be listed as things that you can buy for this vise or whatever. It's not on.
Is that the same spanner you would use to take a DX6 apart?
It is.
It is?
I guess it can be.
It's the same spacing?
We're gonna find out.
My gosh, it is.
So Chuck, can you pull one of those off the shelf for me? There you
I'll
go.
get
You'll be like a superhero walking in. You're like, look what I got.
Yeah, that's right. I'll have to put my name on it.
Let me,
right.
let me look up the part.
Maybe they can etch it for you.
Okay, that'd be awesome.
So that's all the parts for your holding block, and then the one last thing that you probably will never have to deal with, but I can show you how to take it out. This spring-loaded plunger right here, you shouldn't, I mean, it should take quite a bit of force to push that. I've seen one instance where they put the wrong spring in and you could push it in really easily. I guess something to be aware of if the jaws are falling off too easily.
Yep.
It's possible that's the culprit.
Then they can get a kit that has heavier duty springs, especially when this non-screw assembly is in one of the towers, because then it's fighting gravity. Sometimes if they've got a really heavy part in there, or really big jaws, the jaws can pop off because of gravity.
Yep.
And then they would want to get a heavier duty spring in there
Okay.
to prevent that.
So I'm not going to take the other one apart. It's the exact same thing. This flat right here gets retained by the head of the screw coming up against it. You've got a hardened washer, a thrust bearing, a hardened washer. These should be greased. I don't actually have any grease up here to show you guys, but I'll just identify the parts where you would grease it. So this would get greased.
Are the washers the same so they can be inverted or whatever?
Yep.
Yep.
Those drop into the bottom first. And then from there, this holding block just keeps all the springs oriented properly. So that drops in, you feed a spring into each hole.
those springs, they're not directional, they can be either way.
Correct.
Okay.
They are not directional. There's some crud on this one. And then it gets a hardened washer on top. This one's a little harder to put together than the 4-inch because you actually have to preload it. Actually, before I get that far, what I was gonna say is you have to preload it to get it started. On the other one, you can get started without putting any load on it. There's an O-ring in here too to seal up against the shoulder on the threads here. So to get that set, you would just hold it in and work it around. And that's just a replacement seal that you can swap out. So we'll get this started.
Put some weight into it.
Yeah. And then once you got it started, if you look through the top without the set screw in there, you wind it until, like, you can see this isn't far enough yet because I still have threads engaging. Once all those threads are gone,
Okay.
then I can put the set screw's got just a flat on it that'll drop in and retain this. So our factory setting would be just till the threads disappear, which would be here, and that's got the most travel.
Mm-hmm.
So now I can put my set screw in.
Chad, you make this look easy.
I know, he's a pro.
It's a lot to remember because there's a lot of pieces going into it. So that's the very first thing that slides on. And it'll kind of snap in there with the O-ring riding up onto that shoulder. So with that set, so now we would drop these springs into their holes drilled in here, and if I had whey lube, we'd lubricate this, basically fill that to oil it.
You would use whey lube?
Yeah, that's what we use to oil
Yep.
as we're building these. And then the easiest way to do this is to put that O-ring on, drop that piece on, that way you have them in the correct orientation. And then I'll take this roll pin and clamp it into that slot.
Wow.
And then
You just guide it, you get it right over.
drop that in.
Well, you made that look easy.
Yeah, you
did. Holy moly.
That's usually the fun part.
And then I actually, just how it happened to align, I'm actually in the wrong position. And you can tell that because I can move it with my hands.
Yeah.
Once I get it into the correct position, now you won't be able to get that to move. So that's in the correct working position now. And then I gotta put this retaining ring back on. And that probably isn't gonna be seated initially. So you kinda gotta, actually it popped in pretty easily. Otherwise I'll use, where my screwdriver went, I'll use that to kinda push that down, make sure it's fully seated into that groove, which it is now. And then, let's see. Now we put our rear nut back on. So this is where I would grease it. I'd put a big glob of grease along the threads in there and run this in just until the threads disappear from the clutch. And then I can,
That's the front nut, right?
right. And then I can push that O-ring down out of the way and put this spiral retaining ring in. Sometimes these can be a little tricky to get started too.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can kind of force it into that groove by flipping the screwdriver and pushing the other way with it. And now you can see it's fully seated into the groove cut in there.
Oh yeah.
Show Scott where that groove is. You can see it.
If you look in from the end, you can see it's fully
Yeah.
seated in there.
Yep.
And then we can wind this one all the way to the end.
This is real important. You got people out there that will put
Yep.
these things, they take them apart and they put them together, but they forget that you have to time them. So it's gonna go through that.
So on this end, we'll just get it till it's snug and then just break it loose a little bit so it's not tight. Square that block up to it. Now we're back to here. I slide the spiral ring on first. Put this with the, I guess the lip facing out. That's the wiper lip that'll actually keep it clean.
Yep.
And then we'll spin this nut on. Again, just till the threads disappear. And now I can drive the seal down in there. And then finally the retaining ring. And same thing, check to make sure it's fully seated. And now I back this one off the opposite direction of the other one until I feel it hit that. And then I just bring it around until it's even. And now that's ready to go back into your vise. The timing being this one's backed off all the way, and then this one backed off and then brought back around just until they're squared up.
Yep, so sometimes they get them all kilter and they'll have